So, we all had to adapt. New world. Lockdown began. But what was it like for partners, charities, leaders and business? And how on earth did they cope? What did they do? And more importantly, what have they learned? My name's Stephen George. I'm a fundraising and leadership coach, guide and trainer. I work with non-profit leaders and teams to help them discover ways to be better leaders, to raise more money, make a bigger impact. So in this mini series of videos, I get to talk with leaders across the non-profit world about their lockdown lessons. And in this particular video, I get to talk to Dominic Will. Now, I've known Dominic for a long time. Dominic's Managing Director, face-to-face fundraising agency PFS, where he leads the business across the UK and Europe. Dom previously founded and run the award-winning face-to-face agency HOME Fundraising. He's worked with the charity community for over 20 years. He's a committed advocate of the charity sector and professional fundraising itself. And we both served together as trustees of the Institute of Fundraising just recently. Dom currently sits on the Institute of Fundraising's Public Fundraising Strategy Group. And Dom and I got to talk about what happened when social distancing rules were introduced in March 2020. The world changed because of the coronavirus. And of course, face-to-face fundraising literally came to a sudden and abrupt halt, leaving obviously invested charities, agencies and their fundraising in complete crisis. So much of Dom's recent focus has been on preparing for resuming face-to-face fundraising in the post-lockdown world and on developing new ways for engaging supporters. And perhaps surprisingly, he tells us tales of really positive responses from supporters and donors out there, which is really good to hear. This series of videos is brought to you with the help of Turner PR. Now, they're a team of communications specialists. They focus on helping you reach and engage the charity sector. They provide bespoke PR strategies, content solutions, strategic partnerships, and they work with you to raise your voice and profile. So thank you so much for them to be helping and support this little mini series of lockdown lessons. So, I hope you enjoy this. It's a great conversation, a great exploration of what's going on in the face-to-face world now. Enjoy. So it's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm okay, Stephen. Thank you. Very good to see you too. Under these strange circumstances, but no, all good. Thank you. All good.
Weird times, eh? So, for those who don't know you, just give us a bit of background, a bit of introduction of yourself and that, and a bit about the business, and we'll kind of lead into the story about when we went into it and what you're doing and how you're coming out the other side. So just tell us a bit about PFS and you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I've been working in the fundraising sector for well over 20 years now. As you said, for a big chunk of that time has been, kind of running face-to-face agencies. So I was well known before for running HOME Fundraising for the best part of 17 years. More recently, I'm working now at PFS, which is a national face-to-face operation in the UK, and we have people, under kind of normal circumstances in a normal environment, we've got people that are going out working kind of face-to-face fundraising across all of the different face-to-face fundraising channels, so door-to-door, private sites, street fundraising, kind of ad hoc events as well. So we would work on behalf of charities and work face-to-face via those channels to sign up regular donors in the main, but also engage the public, sometimes also in other ways to support as well. So under normal circumstances, we might have kind of 400 to 500 people, going out and having thousands of conversations, every day with members of the public across this land. Obviously, that's been rather curtailed of late, but I'm glad to say that we've over the last month we've taken our kind of first steps in terms of getting back out into the field and really assessing the face-to-face environment and hopefully starting to establish operations again for the good of our charity partners.
So tell us,
it'd be really interesting before we get into the sort of meltdown that we had, you know, and all that moment. But it'd be interesting just to hear your view on face-to-face in, you know, BC before COVID, you know, when we were kind of, you know, in the aftermath of the horror of the 3 or 4 years ago and everything that went through that, and how it changed, how businesses would change fundamentally, and the sector was changing in terms of face-to-face. Give us your take on it as if COVID hadn't happened, or as if we're going back to sort of February time or something. Just it'd be interesting just to see your view on what's the state and what was that state at that time, and what did it feel like, and how was it working? I'm just interested to get your take.
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit difficult to think kind of BC now, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It's weird, isn't it?
it's very much a different era. But no, I mean, I think face-to-face fundraising in you know, particularly in the UK, obviously has been an established channel for decades now. I mean, as I say, I've been involved in it for 4 decades. Not 4 decades, 4 decades.
Oh, it feels like it.
Yeah, I know, completely feels like longer. But no, I think we're in a kind of position where we're still really in a bit of a kind of a state of transition, I would say, because there's been a huge amount, obviously, of face-to-face fundraising that's gone in the UK, as we were saying, over the last 20 years plus. And, you know, I think the great majority of that has been extremely successful. It's been extremely important to the charities that have engaged and either done it themselves or with agency partners, you know, such as PFS, HOME and others. So I think it's become very much part of the kind of established fabric of the fundraising mix. But, you know, there is certainly a need, and has been a need, you know, for a while, to really look at face-to-face and really kind of establish what it is, you know, what are the benefits of it, you know, kind of beyond, you know, the basic economics of kind of regular giving, which is what the channel has always been associated with. And of course, you know, the activity has to make economic sense. You know, businesses need to be able to operate. Charities need to see a return on their investment. But I think we've you know, been for a very long time a little bit kind of too focused on those spreadsheets, rather than kind of getting our heads up a little bit and thinking, all right, well, actually, do you know what we're doing? We are engaging with thousands of people every day. You know, not just our agency, but, you know, all the other agencies, all the other charities. And, you know, there's huge equity in that. And there's huge equity in that communication. And I think that the challenge facing face-to-face, or has been facing face-to-face even for a while, you know, has been to really understand that, you know, the equity in those conversations, and make sure that you know, if you're a fundraiser and you're having, you know, 10 to 15 really positive conversations every time, you know, you work an afternoon or a day or whatever it may be, that you're not just kind of, you know, going home at the end of the day and thinking, all right, great, I've got one regular donor. Well, you know, what about, you know, the other person who, you know, might have been interested in a follow-up legacy conversation, or, you know, someone who wasn't quite ready to give there and then, but, you know, wanted a further conversation, or, you know, someone who wanted to maybe be involved with the organisation in a voluntary capacity. You know, maybe I've got a connection to a potential beneficiary that I want to take further. All of these things. And of course, some of those things are taken forward and can be taken forward, and, you know, and most of them, if not all of them, should be fed back to the charities anyway. But I think there is a challenge within face-to-face to both make sure that all the positive conversations have a true kind of positive outcome for the organisations that we represent. And I think that there's a challenge to make sure that charities understand the true benefits of face-to-face, and that their initial thought isn't just, oh shit, sorry, excuse my language, how much, how many complaints is that going to generate, or should we be interrupting people? So yeah, I mean, I think that the challenge pre-COVID, and that still exists to this day, is saying, okay, really what is it? Let's get our heads up and think about what is this channel, and really what is it delivering, beyond the kind of the standard, the kind of standard way in which we look at it.
It's a real dilemma, isn't it? Because if you're been in fundraising for any length of time, you kind of know that the problem is you instinctively, so it's a bit like legacies. I have this all the time with legacies. You instinctively know things. You know it. It feels right. Everything's right about it. All the evidence is there and everything. But we're in a climate and an environment, and particularly because some people are looking for two things. They're looking for absolute crystal clear evidence, and they're looking for speed. They don't want, they're not prepared to wait, and they're not prepared to see investment and value in the early part of it without there being some really, and of course what that does is it forces you down the wrong road, which is partly why we got into the mess one could argue that we got into.
Yeah.
How do you reinvent that then into something that gives confidence, but actually takes account of a new reality, that equity? I think that's an absolutely great phrase. The equity that there is in these dialogues and conversations that people are having, these moments, which sometimes must be difficult to prove. Even if I was the guy that said, "It's fine, I trust that it's good enough." There aren't many like that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think it is important to to scrutinize this and say, okay, well, all right, fine, that's fine as a concept, but how do we make that work? Both commercially and practically as well. Because it's having done this for a long time, it's not easy. I mean, first and foremost, it's not easy to be a fundraiser. It's not easy to be a face-to-face fundraiser, and if it takes a lot of kind of skill, judgment, and communication ability to be able to really understand, get a sense when you're in conversation with someone as to what their kind of motivations, interests may be, and obviously how to manage that conversation. So we're not talking kind of easy things here, but the fact is that all of those things do happen on a daily basis, and they happen to hundreds, if not thousands, of fundraisers. Again, under normal circumstances around the country. So the raw materials are there in terms of the communication. So it's about saying, well, how do we draw from that resource, and make sure that it's being used. And really that means that there has to be probably a slightly kind of deeper, more strategic partnership, I would say, between agencies and charities, or in-house operations, and the charities in which they represent. Just in the sense of saying, okay, look, this isn't just about a commercial handshake here, and making sure that all the compliance is sorted out, and the kind of the normal nuts and bolts of a campaign is sorted out in terms of training and everything else, and monitoring and reports. It's about saying, okay, well, what do we want to achieve here? If on a very basic level, if the aim is fine, we want to make it commercially successful because we need to have regular donors, and that's fine. But what about those people who need more flexibility, or who can't commit to a regular gift and may just want to give a one-off donation, for instance? Then it's understanding and recognizing that, and not putting your fundraisers in a situation where they feel under pressure to push that too hard the other way. And essentially sell something that someone doesn't want, and to make sure that they are properly incentivized and trained to offer different options. And that's not simple, but it's not impossible either.
No.
I know, obviously from experience of, having been both successful and, also, to be brutally honest, having less successful times where it was tough to stay in business, and ultimately, not be able to stay in business. I understand the challenges here, but I've also come to learn that essentially, setting up different options for fundraisers and making sure that the commercial arrangements are sound both with them and with charities is not an impossibility, but it does take partnership so that both sides understand what it is you're trying to achieve. If I just kind of say to a charity, okay, well, look, this is your kind of rate card, away we go, it's difficult or more difficult to make that work without the engagement and buy-in.
Well, a lot of the responsibility is to do with trustees as well, making the right kind of framework and decisions by which their executives can lead, and it's about having the right conversation and partnership, and not see it as I've said before, I don't like the supplier term. I think it's wrong. I think it's about partnership, and actually my experience is most people who are partners in the business sense who are trying to help charities are as committed fundraisers as pretty well anyone, really. So
I think, I tend to agree, in my experience as well. And I think the thing, if you talk to someone who's been representing, any charity, let's say they've been working for all week, representing, their charity. At the end of that week, I guarantee you, they feel like a fundraiser for that charity. Now, I'm not saying that, of course, it's important that everyone understands, obviously the commercial arrangement, who they're working for, and their responsibilities within that. But on a psychological level, on a kind of connection level, if I'm talking about the cause that I'm representing day in, day out, and I've got some passion for it, then that's who I feel that I'm representing. And within that, you can take, when people get to you can look at this two ways, essentially. You can either say, okay, well, actually, we should be more flexible in terms of our conversations with people, so that people who are new to face-to-face fundraising actually get a chance to get used to conversations and maybe have some other outcomes, rather than being expected to be fantastic at signing up regular givers from the get-go. So you could say, actually, it's a good training tool, to make sure that, people can have conversations. Similarly, you could also argue that actually, I don't want to give more novice fundraisers, that amount of flexibility. It's better that they're kind of focusing more, on a kind of narrower remit, and then maybe it should be, in the direction of more experienced people. So, I guess it's just a demonstration that there are different ways to look at this, but that needs to be understood by both, kind of charity.
Yeah. We are without a doubt inventing, hopefully, kind of, I think you said earlier about a kind of transition. We're still in that transition phase, and it was sort of rudely interrupted by which was on no one's risk register, a pandemic. Even though it was the government's number one risk of disruption. It's quite strange, So take yourself back to the days before, and I've had a number of these conversations, and they're interesting because people go, God, I can't remember, for starters. And then you sort of that pivotal moment when people were talking about what lockdown meant. And for a pretty liberal, open society, lockdown was kind of unprecedented in lots of respects. I don't think anybody really understood what it meant. But in the days before, as the clock is ticking towards an impending health crisis that's going to require a very different decision and therefore response to it, tell us your story of those days in the lead up to that. What happened for you? What did you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember the week before, before lockdown was kind of properly kind of introduced, and just I obviously started getting more tentative around, okay, should I be attending certain client meetings? You were checking on people's kind of attitudes prior to that, and you were starting to kind of make judgments yourself. Certainly, I mean, I live sort of on the fringes of London, and thinking a little bit more about kind of public transport, and what that was starting to mean. Obviously both for our own people in the office, our people in the field, and also client charities that you'd be meeting fairly frequently. So it's just, I suppose what I remember is just that, starting to think, okay, look, I'm going to have to amend behaviour here, and this is going to go beyond my own behaviour. This is going to, obviously go, be far more far-reaching than that. But I think, and maybe this is the same with a lot of people, I'm not sure in those weeks before lockdown, because things moved fairly rapidly, that I was, to be honest, really kind of fully thinking about a full lockdown, a complete, cessation of activities, and certainly then for what sort of period, that would be. So kind of moving into that week, kind of the lockdown, and when the government announcements started sort of coming thick and fast. Remember, kind of on the Monday, we still had pretty much a kind of full complement of activity in terms of face-to-face activity across the country. By the Tuesday evening, that was 90% gone. So in a 48-hour period, our operations have gone from pretty much 100% to less than 10%. And we remained only, in certain areas where we felt it was, kind of appropriate to fundraise, or sites that we felt were appropriate. Before obviously that kind of full cessation at the end of that week. I think it was the week of the 17th of March.
That's right.
I remember the date. Yeah. For obviously face-to-face fundraising is a very operational business or activity, in the sense that, on a practical level, there's an awful lot of organising around territory management, around site management, around all of the elements that travel arrangements, all of the elements that one needs to think about when human beings are moving to one place to another, setting themselves up accordingly, having all the kind of necessary materials and training in place to enable them to do their job to the best ability. And just to cease, not even kind of overnight, on the same day, pretty much in most instances, was something that is, obviously we've never done before, and was extremely difficult. We knew we had to do it. At that point, we were obviously trying to kind of manage risk against, trying to, obviously reduce, the business operations, in a kind of manageable way. But it became very, very clear that, the vast majority of activity, had to cease very, very quickly. And, for an operational business, that's tough, just from a kind of practical point of view. But then, of course, you're then immediately thinking from a business point of view, okay, that's going to be a big challenge, because you're going from, income coming in to the business one day to zero coming in the following day. And of course, this is before we kind of truly understand, any kind of government support, anything that's going to be available to the business, where, obviously we've got a, kind of a duty of care to, our own people, but then, of course, we need to kind of, manage any kind of cessation of activities, with the charities as positively as, and as well as possible, from a kind of PR point of view and a practical point of view. So all of these huge considerations having to be done in an instant was a massive, massive challenge. Yeah. And I remember the week very, very clearly. As I say, I remember the date, I remember the week very clearly.
Yeah, it's not a thing. We'll probably, you're right, because we get that. The scale of it kind of crept up on us, wasn't it? It is interesting. People do look at that week, at that moment when it was pretty serious advice not to move to we mean it now, don't go anywhere. Kind of was only eight days, I think 6, 7, 8 days. It wasn't. And there was space as well. It's interesting because there was the space of your business where you think, well, where's the money coming from? How am I going to, And then that took 4 or 5, maybe I think 6 days, I think it was, for any government announcement bit that said, we're holding the line for you. And that's quite something. So essentially when that happened, you had to shut down the whole of the operation pretty well. And you put people on furlough and that, and now what does that bit in the middle look like, and what is coming back looking like for you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, immediately, thoughts turned to, obviously making sure that the business itself would be sustainable in the short term. I mean, no business very few businesses can survive any significant length of time, with literally no income coming in, or very limited income coming in. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the focus turns to that. And I think at that stage, you're also thinking, or rather, I would have been, I remember at that point not thinking, okay, this is going to last for 4 or 5 months or something like that. You're just not thinking that way at that point. You're thinking it's going to be a kind of shorter lockdown period. So yeah, I mean, obviously it was kind of looking at the business situation. It was, making sure that, we had very open lines of communication, to charity partners, in terms of, what they were, kind of thinking and experiencing, because, obviously the challenges are, as we know, and have been great for the third sector, just in terms of, access to income, and, a lot of that being, pretty much turned off overnight. So, yeah, and in those very early stages, we weren't yet sure, as we said, of kind of any support for the business. So we looked very, very quickly, at how we might, kind of redeploy field staff, whether that was, somehow helping, kind of local community efforts, whether that was in a kind of voluntary capacity or otherwise. We do have some other kind of income streams at PFS. We have a kind of telephone operation, but these things are relatively small in comparison to to what we bring in via the kind of face-to-face channels. So really for us, it was about obviously assessing how we would shore up the business, and and obviously the government reacted quite swiftly as far as we were concerned, and our business needs in that environment back then. I know it was different experiences for different people depending on your business circumstances, but there were certain reassurances we had, but yeah, I mean we still had a significant field force that we wanted to provide alternatives for, which was challenging. We nearly got a couple of really, really interesting kind of community initiatives going, whereby literally, guys in the field, could have been redeployed, just as kind of support or outreach, kind of community workers, effectively working on behalf of certain charities that, that obviously do a lot of kind of local community outreach. But the situation was moving so quickly. It was, a project that looked good to go on a Monday, suddenly an announcement would come out, and it wouldn't then be sensible to put that level of people in the field. That makes sense. So it was very, very challenging, because we were trying to find solutions, but the situation was changing almost daily. Yes, we were looking at kind of developing further our other income streams, which it's helped us kind of hit the fast forward button on certain elements of that, whether it be telephone, certain kind of digital acquisition that we're engaged with. But again, these won't replace the kind of core business. So very, very challenging. And to be honest, it's been very, very hard work, across that time. Just a slightly different type of work. Just trying to find solutions. And we kind of had limited success, I have to say, in finding those kind of alternative solutions for the guys in the field.
It's really difficult, I mean, if you're a restaurant and that, there were, restaurants were going, well, I'll just, there's a kind of alternative to sitting down in your restaurant to eating, because you're still eating, is takeaway, isn't it? And, and all those other kind of, or selling products and kind of stuff. You can move some elements. I mean, some tremendous business stories of innovation and adaptability that have gone on. But for some businesses, almost, you know, the interesting thing is for years and years, people have been trying to work out other income stream to alternatives to, well, you're not going to do it in 4 months in the middle of a lockdown, when everyone's at, it's kind of hard, isn't it? In lots of ways to do that. But people are desperate to get back into the face-to-face stuff. You know, we're back in there. I mean, at the time we're recording this, I don't know what's going to be happening in terms of whether it's second wave or whether it's just this first wave, but lumping along and still in. What does that look like now for the re-emergence effectively of PFS and the sector from the perspective of actually having those conversations back on the street again?
Yeah, well, I mean, the planning, you know, we kind of moved from, you know, our focus being on, yeah, I mean, there's still a certain amount of focus on those other income streams, but, you know, over the last couple of months, and probably, I mean, maybe for longer, I would say, you know, we've done a huge amount of work, and, you know, and credit to everyone, you know, sort of involved in this, just in terms of the level of planning around resuming activities has been huge. And, you know, because it's kind of all encompassing, you know, it covers every element of a face-to-face campaign, you know, whether it's, you know, whether you're planning your kind of door-to-door territory, whether you're planning your private sites, you know, how are you going to manage those sites? You know, how are you going to make sure, you know, that the fundraisers, you know, have, you know, the necessary PPE equipment, obviously, that we've been looking at during lockdown, and obviously there have been, you know, kind of various levels of recommendations, you know, around that at different points. You know, how are you going to ensure social distancing? You know, is it possible to approach people, you know, if you're wearing a mask or a visor? You know, if you're at a private site and you're kind of social distancing 2 meters, you know, the training, how are you going to, you know, effectively train your guys, you know, if you're not having, you know, kind of group sessions in the office, you know, how are you going to bring, you know, charity representatives, you know, kind of close to those guys, all of these things. So, you know, and there'll be, you know, a list as long as you're on that, you know, I won't bore you with now, but the level of planning has been very, very detailed and, you know, kind of very, very, very kind of resource heavy in terms of, you know, time and effort that's gone in. But I think that, you know, ultimately has been of huge benefit. I mean, I accept, obviously, you know, we wouldn't have been able to get out and start fundraising again, you know, without that level of preparation. But I tell you, Stephen, what's really interesting we've been out nearly a month now, you know, and of course it's kind of, you know, lower level, and we're kind of gradually growing. It's nothing like kind of, you know, pre-pandemic levels, but you know, we're now spread across the country in a number of different regions, you know, and we will have, you know, say signed up probably, well, in excess of, you know, 1,000 people. Or 1,000 regular supporters, you know, a large number of kind of one-off contactless cash donors as well. So, you know, we're generating, you know, something a little bit more significant now. But I think what's been really, really interesting is the positive response, not just to the fact that, you know, charities are back out and they're visible, and, you know, people understand that obviously charities need to be back out and visible and fundraising now. It's been the level of care and commitment to fundraiser safety, public safety, and how seriously the fundraisers are acting, you know, whether they're knocking a door, whether they're on a private site, that we've had an unprecedented, sorry, use the unprecedented word, sorry, but that we've had a huge number of unsolicited positive feedback from members of the public, quite often that haven't given a one-off donation or a regular donation, but they've called in or emailed to say that, look, you know, we had, you know, a great person round, you know, to our door earlier, You know, it was just fantastic to see them, you know, being so sensitive around the situation. We can't afford to give at the moment, but we just want to wish you, you know, the best of luck, you know, or something along those lines.
Right, isn't it?
And it's absolutely fantastic to see. And then it provides a whole new, or it creates a whole new dynamic, you know, in terms of those conversations, because a lot of the conversations, you know, will start with, oh, right, okay, you know, you're wearing your visor, you know, you've got your kind of armband on around, you know, kind of maintaining social distance, and to see you're taking this really seriously. So actually, I'm going to be okay to engage with you and talk. And it creates a whole kind of sense of professionalism and care around, you know, what the face-to-face fundraising industry is doing. And that is, you know, I think a huge credit to the industry, you know, not just our guys, but I think the industry as a whole. I think charities really need to recognise that. They need to recognise that rather than sort of immediately kind of viewing this as risk. You know, let's look at this as an opportunity to show, you know, just how seriously charities, you know, take, you know, fundraiser and public safety, but they, you know, they need to be engaging as well. And I think it's hugely important.
It's also, it's actually, it's a really important point you made, because it's also in the context when the public recognise that charities need money, and they hear every day a story of a charity in trouble or redundancies or income dropping, or they kind of know that, you know, all the stories I've heard is just where donors actually get and understand that they give, and if they don't give, there's an impact and a consequence of that. And so they know, they recognize that there is a role for people to ask for money. Hurrah, you know, at last kind of thing. They kind of got those things. So for an awful lot of people, the context of asking because there's an urgency in it sort of overrides that other, probably overemphasized negative aspect to it that people would allow to dominate a little bit. You know, I could see where trustees would go, oh no, that's awkward, and that, rather than actually focusing on the, as you say, positive opportunity that might spin from it. There must be positive opportunity that spins from it, from this context, this climate, because I think those charities that are asking and asking well are getting good traction and results, and those who aren't are regretting the fact they didn't lean out. So
I think that's right. And I think, you know, as you know, we talked earlier about, you know, kind of BC before COVID, and, you know, and a lot of the issues that, you know, the fundraising industry has faced in general, you know, since kind of 2015, you know, and this, you know, the initial focus now, or, you know, for a while has been on, you know, compliance and risk, and, you know, okay, well, you know, can we do this? Should we be doing this? And I accept that needs to be there to a degree. Of course it does. But when that completely overshadows, or where the emphasis is more on kind of risk management than actually, okay, you know, again, getting back to that original point, what does this activity mean? What can we do? How can we use it? How can we engage people? How can we build on it? And then and I say, what I completely underestimated, and, you know, I appreciate this sounds like a sales pitch for face-to-face, and maybe, you know, it is in a degree, but what I completely underestimated was how positively the guys would be responded to and accepted by the public. Of course, people who, you know, who don't want to engage won't engage, but, you know, are doing so positively still.
Yeah.
You know, of course, you know, people who don't want to open their door won't open their door, and that's absolutely cool. That's absolutely fine. But, you know, that's kind of offset by, you know, the number of, you know, people like myself, like yourself, who are in during the day more than they would have been previously. So there's access to so many more conversations, say from a, you know, a residential door-to-door point of view. Yes, that's a little bit more of a challenge from a private sites point of view, you know, where there's kind of fewer footfall or lesser footfall in a lot of sites. But, you know, well, again, what offsets that is that the conversations are so positive at the moment. And of course, it'll be interesting to see, you know, how that develops. But I do think that this would have, you know, sown quite a deep seed, I hope, you know, in the psyche of a lot of people who've kind of seen fundraisers, you know, had them at their doorstep. Actually, do you know what? Charities, fundraisers, they're taking this extremely seriously, and they're doing a really important thing. And you know what? Next time I see one of those guys, you know, I'm gonna consider, you know, what they've got to say.
And they get the connection between asking and giving. Without the asking taking place, the giving doesn't happen. And if the giving doesn't happen, the organization doesn't deliver the stuff that they want to see. And, you know, it's stripped everything out in a way. And we kind of lost that simple, basic, you know, cause and effect. We sort of lost it a little bit. I think that's been one of the difficulties that we've had. So what was your biggest learning, you know, business wise, personally, throughout this sort of interesting experience? If you had a sort of, at this moment, because we're still in the middle of it and we're still going through it. For now though, what would be a big learning for you?
I think the biggest learning, probably from a business point of view, has been that you absolutely, in such a serious, wide-ranging situation, you have to challenge your assumptions constantly. You know, so how you're kind of reacting at the, you know, in the initial phase of something as big as this, you will need to adapt quickly. And, you know, so for instance, you know, I remember, you know, when it became clear really, you know, the gravity of the situation, you know, just thinking, God, you know, what is this? What does this mean for face-to-face fundraising? I mean, you know, just forgetting business and everything for a second. But I mean, you know, is it going to be possible in any way? You know, I mean, how on earth are you going to, you know, engage someone in this environment? And again, you know, my learning is that, you know, by understanding the situation, you know, by listening to what goes on, you know, both in your own environment, but then, you know, we've learned so much from kind of overseas as well, you know, and I think those networks have been really, really strong, you know, just in, you know, there's fundraising networks that exist that share information, you know, they exist within the kind of face-to-face community and in the wider fundraising community. So, you know, I would say, you know, the learning is that, you know, remain, you know, creative, flexible, adaptive, and, you know, try not to panic.
On that note, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to end it. Absolutely. It sort of sums it all up.
Says don't panic. Yeah.
Don't panic. Where can people get you? Going, but I don't mean get you. I mean, come and find you out. Where can people hunt you down and track you down? Where could they get you?
I know. I haven't been able to do my judo for 4 months, so I'm terrible. I can't defend.
You'll be a pushover then. So where would they go?
Yeah, so, well, obviously, you can get me via the PFS website. You can kind of link through to me from there, which is pfs-limited.org. I'm on LinkedIn. If you just look up Dominic Will on LinkedIn, you'll find me there. So, yeah, happy to connect. Yeah, either way. It's just good to hear from people. And, you know, and just, again, you know, kind of getting back to that kind of point around, you know, learning from, you know, both networks here in the UK and around the world. I think that's been a kind of huge thing, and you know, I think is of great benefit, you know, to the kind of fundraising world at large. Some of these networks that exist that I know you're very active in, and I thank you for it.
I think that's it's been really interesting because the world has without a doubt shrunk even more than what it was before this. You know, people have gone online, and there's this kind of discussion and debate, and loads of these conversations, you know, either I've observed other people are having, but there is a powerful sense of sharing it in order to help each other through it, but actually because they want to learn and do better when they know that, you know, that phrase "build back better" is actually really, really, I think, a really good one for this. And in a sense, that's probably the way to think about it. Fantastic. So good to talk to you again. You know, I'm glad you're still here and cracking on, and hopefully more optimistic and, you know, positive days ahead. Fingers crossed.
I think so. Yeah, great to see you, and yeah, great to talk, Stephen. Thank you.
Catch up soon. All right.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.